React Class Components. Before React 16.8, class components were the only way to track state and lifecycle on a React component. Function components were considered stateless. With the addition of hooks, function components are now almost equivalent to class components. The differences are so minor that you will probably never need to use a class component in React. Even though function components are preferred, there are no current plans on removing class components from React. This section will give you an overview of how to use class components in React. Feel free to skip this section and use function components instead. Please subscribe my YouTube channel and press bell icon for further notifications. Thanks. React Components. Components are independent and reusable bits of code. They serve the same purpose as JavaScript functions, but work in isolation and return HTML via a render function. Components come in two types, class components and function components. In this chapter you will learn about class components. Create a class component. When creating a React component, the component's name must start with an uppercase letter. The component has to include the extends React component statement. This statement creates an inheritance to React component and gives your component access to React.components functions. The component also requires a render method. This method returns HTML. Example. Create a class component called car. Code. Now your React application has a component called car, which returns a less than h2 element. To use this component in your application, use similar syntax as normal HTML, car/. Example. Display the car component in the root element. Code. Component constructor. If there is a constructor function in your component, this function will be called when the component gets initiated. The constructor function is where you initiate the component's properties. In React, component properties should be kept in an object called state. You will learn more about state later in this tutorial. The constructor function is also where you honor the inheritance of the parent component by including the super statement, which executes the parent component's constructor function, and your component has access to all the functions of the parent component, React component. Example. Create a constructor function in the car component and add a color property. Code. Use the color property in the render function. Example. Code. Props. Another way of handling component properties is by using props. Props are like function arguments, and you send them into the component as attributes. You will learn more about props in the next chapter. Example. Use an attribute to pass a color to the car component, and use it in the render function. Code. Props in the constructor. If your component has a constructor function, the props should always be passed to the constructor and also to the React component via the super method. Example. Code. Components in components. We can refer to components inside other components. Example. Use the car component inside the garage component. Code. Components in files. React is all about reusing code, and it can be smart to insert some of your components in separate files. To do that, create a new file with a .js file extension and put the code inside it. Note that the file must start by importing React, as before, and it has to end with the statement export default car. Example. This is the new file, we named it car.js. Code. To be able to use the car component, you have to import the file in your application. Example. Now we import the car.js file in the application, and we can use the car component as if it was created here. Code.